The CIA drugged Americans without consent. The Soviets built a doomsday machine that could end the world on autopilot, and the US almost nuked the moon just to flex. These Cold War secrets stayed buried for decades, and number one is absolutely diabolical. Let's talk about Operation Midnight Climax, because yes, that's the real name, and yes, it's exactly as wild as it sounds. Picture the CIA running actual brothels in San Francisco and New York during the 1950s and 60s. These weren't just any brothels, though. They were laboratories disguised as pleasure houses, complete with two-way mirrors, recording equipment, and agents watching from the shadows like some twisted reality show. The women working there? CIA operatives. The men walking through those doors? Unsuspecting targets who had no idea they were about to become guinea pigs. The agency would dose these men with LSD and other hallucinogens, then watch what happened.
Where they thought they were going to get laid, dose them with LSD, and then interrogate them and try to get them to give up their deepest secrets.
They'd study everything from behavioral changes to interrogation techniques, all while these guys thought they were just having a good time.
At least 20 years. You know, there was an operation, it was a sub-operation of MK-Ultra.
The whole operation ran under the umbrella of MK-Ultra, the CIA's larger mind control program, and it violated every ethical boundary you can imagine. No consent, no warnings, just straight-up experimentation on American citizens. George Hunter White, a federal narcotics agent, ran the show from a pad in San Francisco's Telegraph Hill. He'd sit behind that mirror with a martini in hand, watching the chaos unfold. The operation finally shut down in 1966, but the damage was done. Countless men were drugged, studied, and sent on their way, without ever knowing they'd been part of an illegal government experiment. Now let's jump to something that sounds like science fiction but was deadly serious. The Soviets called it perimeter. The rest of the world knew it as dead hand.
Russia was so paranoid that the United States was going to launch a preemptive nuclear attack against it. They created a system whereby ground sensors would be able to determine nuclear bombs hitting the Russian soil.
This was an automated nuclear response system designed to launch every missile in the Soviet arsenal, even if everyone in command was already dead. Think about that for a second. A machine with the power to end civilization, programmed to act on its own if it detected a nuclear attack and couldn't reach Soviet leadership. The system worked like this. Seismic sensors spread across the USSR would detect incoming nuclear strikes. Communication nodes would try to reach Soviet commanders. If those commanders didn't respond because they were, vaporized, Dead Hand would assume the worst and automatically launch a full-scale counterstrike against the United States and its allies. The Soviets developed this nightmare in the 1980s during the height of nuclear paranoia. They were terrified of a decapitation strike where the US would take out Soviet leadership so fast that nobody could authorize retaliation. Dead Hand was their insurance policy. Even in death, they'd drag everyone else down with them. Operation Paperclip is one of those programs that makes you question everything about American moral authority during the Cold War.
Tell the people about Operation Paperclip, about how we went and got the German scientists, Werner von Braun and his crowd, to come over here.
So Werner von Braun invents rockets, basically.
After World War II ended, the US and Soviet Union both scrambled to scoop up Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians before the other side could grab them. The Americans weren't picky about who they recruited either. War crimes, Nazi Party membership, involvement in atrocities, none of that mattered if you had valuable knowledge about rockets, chemical weapons, or aerospace engineering. The operation brought over 1,600 German scientists and their families to the United States. The most famous was Werner von Braun, the rocket engineer who developed the V-2 missile that terrorized London during the war. Those V-2s were built by slave labor at concentration camps, where thousands of prisoners died from brutal conditions. Von Braun knew all about it. He'd visited the facilities. He'd seen the suffering. Didn't matter. The US government gave him a clean slate, a new identity, and eventually made him the face of NASA's space program. The FBI and military intelligence officers literally went through files and removed incriminating evidence about these scientists' Nazi pasts. They attached paper clips to the cleaned-up files, which is how the operation got its name. Then they brought these men to America, set them up with jobs, and let them help build the weapons and spacecraft that would define the Cold War. In 1958, somebody at the Air Force looked up at the moon and thought, you know what would be cool? Blowing that thing up.
In the late 1950s, America had a plan, codenamed Project A-119, to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon. Why, you ask? To show off its military might, of course.
Project A-119 was a legitimate proposal to detonate a nuclear bomb on the lunar surface. The plan was to create a flash visible from Earth, a massive display of American power that would terrify the Soviets and boost morale back home during a time when the USSR seemed to be winning the space race. The Air Force recruited astronomer Carl Sagan, who was still in his 20s, to work on the project. They wanted to calculate the trajectory, the size of the explosion, and how visible it would be from Earth. Sagan ran the numbers. The military started making serious plans. The idea was to hit the terminator, the line between the dark and light sides of the moon, so the explosion would create maximum visibility. They figured a mushroom cloud of lunar dust rising from the surface would be an unforgettable demonstration of American technological superiority. Thankfully, cooler heads eventually prevailed. Scientists pointed out the international backlash would be catastrophic. The UN would lose its mind. American allies would be horrified. Plus, contaminating the moon with radiation before anyone had even set foot there seemed like a terrible idea for future exploration. Project Azorian might be the most expensive covert operation in CIA history, and it involved stealing half of a Soviet submarine from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. In 1968, a Soviet Gulf II-class submarine designated K-129 sank in the Pacific under mysterious circumstances, taking its crew of 98 sailors and 3 nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles down with it. The Soviets searched for months, but couldn't locate the wreck. The US Navy found it first, sitting in 16,500 feet of water, and immediately saw an opportunity. The CIA wanted that submarine, the nuclear missiles, the code books, the encryption equipment, and everything inside could provide priceless intelligence about Soviet capabilities. There was just one problem. The wreck was sitting 3 miles down in international waters, and any obvious recovery attempt would trigger a massive diplomatic incident. So the CIA came up with an elaborate cover story. They approached billionaire Howard Hughes and convinced him to be the public face of a deep-sea mining operation. Hughes's company would build a massive ship called the Hughes Glomar Explorer, supposedly designed to mine manganese nodules from the ocean floor. In reality, every system on that ship was designed for one purpose: secretly grabbing a Soviet submarine. The Glomar Explorer was an engineering marvel. It had a massive claw system that could reach the ocean floor, grab the submarine, and lift it into a hidden compartment inside the ship's hull. The whole operation cost about $800 million in today's money. In 1974, 6 years after K-129 sank, the Glomar Explorer positioned itself over the wreck site and started the recovery. Everything went according to plan at first. The claw descended, grabbed the submarine, and started lifting. Then disaster struck. About 8,000 feet from the surface, part of the submarine broke apart and fell back to the ocean floor, taking 2 nuclear torpedoes with it. The CIA managed to recover about 38 feet of the submarine's forward section, including the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. They gave those sailors a proper burial at sea with military honors, which they filmed in case they ever needed to prove to the Soviets that the operation was conducted respectfully. The intelligence haul was disappointing compared to what they'd hoped for, but the operation remained secret until 1975, when investigative journalists broke the story. The whole thing was so elaborate that Glomar response entered the intelligence lexicon. When the CIA doesn't want to confirm or deny something, they call it a Glomar response, named after this operation. Operation Ivy Bells took underwater espionage to a whole new level. The NSA and US Navy discovered that the Soviets had run communication cables along the ocean floor in the Sea of Okhotsk, connecting their naval bases and transmitting high-level military communications. The Soviets figured these cables were safe from interception because they were underwater in territorial waters, heavily guarded by their Pacific fleet. They were wrong. The US sent specially modified submarines into the Sea of Okhotsk to find these cables and tap them. Navy divers would exit the submarine at depths of 400 feet, locate the cables in near-freezing water, and attach recording devices that would intercept everything flowing through those lines. The taps were powered by the cables themselves and could record for weeks before the submarine had to return and retrieve them. This operation ran for years during the 1970s, providing the US with unprecedented access to Soviet naval communications. The Soviets had no idea their most secure communication lines were compromised. They discussed fleet movements, weapons tests, and strategic plans, all of which got recorded and analyzed by American intelligence. The operation only got exposed because of a betrayal. NSA analyst Ronald Pelton sold information about Ivy Bells to the Soviets for $35,000. When Soviet divers discovered the taps in 1981, they recovered the devices and put them on public display as evidence of American espionage. Operation Chrome Dome sounds like something from a dystopian movie, but it was standard procedure for years during the Cold War. From 1960 to 1968, the Strategic Air Command kept B-52 bombers loaded with nuclear weapons in the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These weren't practice runs. These planes carried live thermonuclear bombs, flying patterns around the borders of the Soviet Union, ready to drop their payload at a moment's notice if the order came. The logic was simple but terrifying. If the Soviets launched a surprise nuclear strike and destroyed US missile silos and bomber bases, these airborne planes would survive and could immediately retaliate. They called it the Airborne Alert, and at any given time, multiple B-52s were circling, waiting for World War III to start. Each bomber carried multiple nuclear weapons with yields far exceeding what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The planes would fly to designated points near Soviet airspace, loiter there for hours, then return to base, where another bomber would take over the patrol. The program ended in 1968, not because the threat decreased, but because of accidents. Several B-52s crashed while carrying nuclear weapons, including incidents in Palomares, Spain, and Thule, Greenland. These crashes scattered radioactive material and nearly caused international incidents. After the Thule crash, where a B-52 carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashed into sea ice, the Pentagon finally decided the risks outweighed the benefits. But for 8 years, the world lived with nuclear-armed bombers constantly in the air, one mechanical failure or miscommunication away from accidentally starting Armageddon. Before we get to number 1, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which of these operations shocked you the most. Your support keeps this content coming. Now for the darkest secret of the Cold War, MK-Ultra.
In the 1960s, MK-Ultra was in full swing across California. And our government was pretty deranged in what they were trying to do with that program. They were interested specifically, as just one facet of MK-Ultra, in using magnets, I kid you not, to hack our brain.
This wasn't just one program. It was an umbrella for 149 sub-projects that turned American citizens into unwitting test subjects for the CIA's experiments in mind control, torture, and psychological warfare. Starting in 1953, the CIA pumped millions of dollars into research that included dosing people with LSD without their knowledge, subjecting them to electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, verbal and sexual abuse, and psychological torture that left permanent damage. They didn't target criminals or volunteers. They grabbed college students, mental patients, prisoners, and random citizens off the street. The program ran experiments at 80 institutions, including prestigious universities, hospitals, and prisons. Researchers would tell subjects they were receiving treatment for depression or anxiety, then pump them full of hallucinogens and subject them to brutal psychological experiments. Some people were kept on LSD for weeks at a time. Others were locked in isolation chambers for days. Many suffered complete mental breakdowns that destroyed their lives. If this video opened your eyes to how deep the Cold War secrets really go, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to know the truth. Drop a comment telling me which operation shocked you most. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started with uncovering the stories they don't want you to know. Thank you for watching. See y'all in the next video.